What about parvo and intestinal parasites? So anybody who knows me knows I'm pretty hardcore against the artificial chemical injections used to prevent diseases. Because they're toxic, they screw up the immune system, but mainly because disease just simply doesn't work that way. So when I'm discussing the toxicity of vaccines with clients, especially those who have a new puppy, I often hear, but what about parvo? Parvo is all about terrain theory, and I go into great detail about that in my book, Why Our Pets Are Unhealthy. But we'll talk about it a little bit here. So terrain theory is all about the visible terrain that you can see when you look at the yard, but it's also about the soil microbiome, the terrain in there of the billions of bacteria that are in a handful of dirt. So when we're dealing with parvo and intestinal parasites, we usually find that these pups come from a yard that's just barren dirt ground covered in feces with no grass or vegetation. It's all been trampled. Without the grass vegetation, there's no shelter or moisture or food for bugs, and there's no roots to help retain the rainwater, so the ground becomes barren and trampled, or it becomes a soupy mess of mud and feces when it rains or snows. So there's no earthworms, there's no beetles, there's no normal flora. Flora is living things that aren't plants, so bugs, worms, bacteria. There's none of that normal stuff in the soil, and that keeps it out of balance. In addition to that, it's absolutely inundated with feces from the adult dogs who have lived in the yard for years, who are fed cheap, crappy kibble, which creates unhealthy bacteria in those dogs' gut, so there's unhealthy bacteria in their poop. And this unhealthy bacteria is usually what we call bad bacteria or pathogenic bacteria. So why is the yard inundated with unhealthy feces? And as a sidebar, there is definitely such a thing as healthy feces, healthy poop, but we'll have to discuss that another time. So why is the yard inundated? So what I've seen throughout my career is that parvo is almost always, and I know that's an absolute, it's either absolute or it's not, but we're going to go with this anyway. Parvo is almost always found in puppies of a certain age range where their immune system isn't the strongest, and they're living in a very unsanitary situation. This is poor husbandry, poor care. Sometimes it's neglect, but it's not usually direct neglect. It's more of just poor socioeconomic conditions where the puppies just aren't well cared for. Hence, they usually have a small yard that's barren, that all the grass has been trampled or dug up by the adult dogs, and it's got years of low quality poop with bad bacteria accumulating in the yard. But nature doesn't like this unhealthy yard. Nature is always going to try to fix or balance out a problem, and that's because of the concept that there is no waste in nature. That's a key concept in my book. So these puppies end up with parasites like coccidia and giardia and intestinal worms like hookworms and roundworms, because these worms and parasites develop in the soil to try to literally feed off of and clean up all the bad bacteria and toxic stuff that's in the soil. If the worms are able to do their job, they still may infect the puppy's intestines to clean the intestines out, or they may not. But if there's too much going on and the worms are not enough to do the job, then parvovirus will develop or move in to try to detoxify all the stuff that's built up in the intestinal lining and cells of the puppies. But because there is no waste in nature, everything happens for a reason. That means parvovirus is not some random militant invader just looking to kill random puppies. Instead, it serves a very specific and necessary purpose of helping to clean up the waste or detoxify the intestinal cells in the puppy. Now, the problem is the collateral damage that's done to these cells when the parvovirus moves in to detoxify. If the cells lining the intestines are so toxic and so full of bad material, then the parvovirus will completely destroy the cell. And then these puppies have a compromised lining of their intestines. They lose blood and fluid in the form of terrible bloody diarrhea, and they get severely dehydrated, and they literally die from dehydration. Now, parvo is only contagious if the other puppies in the group have the same toxins in their guts, which they usually do, but otherwise it's not a random thing. So the question was, what do we do about parvo? And I haven't answered that directly, but I've indirectly answered it if you've paid attention. All you have to do is go physically see where this puppy or kitten is coming from. See the yard, see the house. If it's unclean, then you can expect your puppy's going to be sick with worms or parvo. If this breeder, and usually it's not a real breeder, usually it's just somebody on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist who has some puppies they're selling kind of cheap. If they won't let you see the environment or see the adult dogs, then don't get a puppy or kitten from them, period. Don't do it. If you already have one of these puppies, which is usually where I meet people, they've already got the puppy, then what you need to do is feed it real food like raw milk, or give it immune support supplements, and there's a variety of those things. Do whatever you can do to foster a clean, healthy gut and boost the immune system. because you prevent parvo by ensuring that the gut is not toxic enough that it makes it attractive to parvo. If it's full of toxins, the parvo virus is going to move in and it's going to do its job to detoxify, and it doesn't care about the collateral damage if the puppy lives or dies. It's going to do its job to clean out the cells. So we've got to try to keep the gut and the cells as clean and healthy as possible to prevent parvo. So you've got to do what's best for you and your puppy. And that decision's on you. It's not my decision, and it's not your veterinarian's decision. So it's not my decision to tell you to not vaccinate. And it's not your regular vet's decision to tell you to vaccinate. You have to make that decision for yourself. And you've got to do what's best for you. If you need to get the vaccine, if you think that's your best defense, then do it and own it and deal with it. And if you're confident in what you're doing and confident in my concepts of no waste in nature and terrain theory, and you're willing to feed your puppy an appropriate, raw, whole foods, carnivore diet as they would eat in nature, well, then that's how I would prevent parvo in my puppy, is to feed it that way. Thanks.